Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1098B, and today's date is October 11th, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers Are in the Process of Forcing Russia into a War. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I placed an interview with Harley Schlinger on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So all you need to do is go over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It'll bring you right to the video. You can also come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You can play the video there. Or you can go over to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there, and you can play it right on the site. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, coming out of the corporate media, U.S. government, the various agencies in the United States government, we always hear them talking about terrorism, homegrown terrorists, extremists, and we know that they want us to believe that there's terrorism around the world, in the United States, and they're coming to get us. They also want us to believe that there's domestic terrorism. So the FBI decided to create this study and found that anger over U.S. military operations abroad was the most commonly cited motivation for individuals involved in cases of homegrown terrorism. So let me get this straight. People in the United States who are angry that our U.S. military is operating abroad, creating war for no reason whatsoever, this is creating people here to turn into terrorists. Well, this is what they like you to believe. But really what's happening is that there's a growing number of people who are figuring out the truth and starting to realize that, wait a minute, the central banking system, the U.S. government, remember it's a fascist country we're in, so everything is intermixed. They are using our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, our cousins to go over to fight in different countries to keep the central banking system operational. And they will do it by killing others. And of course, they don't care if the American soldier gets killed because they'll just replace them with another sheeple person and send them out there. That's the way they see this. And they're saying that since they're doing this, people are getting angry and they're turning into terrorists. But what's really happening is people are starting to realize that, well, wait a minute. Why are we even in these countries? What's the whole purpose of it? Why are we in Syria? Why are we in Libya, Yemen? And what the FBI is trying to do is they're trying to create this propaganda story that those people who don't agree with the central bank, with the U.S. government, the elite, those people, they're the problem. And of course, I've said this many, many times before. Every time the people do not agree with the government, a puppet government, they are automatically referred to as terrorists. Think about it for a second. Out in Yemen, out in Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, once they have those puppet governments in place, all those people who don't want the puppet government there, don't want the U.S. there, they're automatically called terrorists. They call them Al-Qaeda. And the reason for that is because they needed legislation to go after Al-Qaeda. So those people who don't want the puppet government in their country, they're automatically designated as Al-Qaeda. They're terrorists. In Ukraine, when the southeastern people didn't agree with the U.S. coming in and have a coup d'etat and throwing out their elected government, those people who would not conform, they were automatically designated as terrorists. And when the U.S. government wants to go into a country and overthrow the elected government, they use terrorists, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Islamic State. So here in the United States, what the FBI, their conclusions, they're saying that those individuals that are angry about what the central bank, what the U.S. government, the elite are doing with our soldiers, those individuals, well, they will become homegrown terrorists. They will be the problem. This is what they're trying to say, because they know there's going to be a problem. They know eventually there's going to be a small group of individuals who are looking at what is going on around the world, and they're going to say enough is enough. And this is what the U.S. government central bankers are worried about. That if those individuals, that small group, spread the word, more people will figure it out. And as more people figure it out, the ranks of these people continually grows. And as it continually grows, it gets harder and harder to control. And this is why you see the FBI coming out with all these different studies and reports talking about extremism, homegrown terrorists, domestic terrorism, people who don't agree with the government. They're trying to make their case. This is why they're saying, listen, if you see something, say something. Tell on your neighbor. That's why they're putting all of this in place. You have to remember, most of the terrorists, the terrorism, the events that we see, they're created by the government. Because we can see from all the evidence that has been produced and everything that we've found out over the years is that the United States funds terrorism, they support terrorism, they use terrorism, and they use terrorism inside of this country to scare the people. I mean, think about how many people right now don't believe that Al-Qaeda actually took down the World Trade Center. Everyone says, absolutely not. It was not Al-Qaeda. No one even believes that story anymore. Maybe when it was initially happening, they did. But later on, when they did research, they looked into it, they started to realize, no, this whole thing was a false flag. It wasn't Al-Qaeda. They had nothing to do with it. It was an inside job. It was other foreign countries, other individuals that were attached to the World Trade Center, who wanted to start war in Afghanistan, who wanted to change the laws in the United States. So those individuals that are waking up, that's who they are afraid of. Now, out in Europe, we understand the United States government central bankers set up a U.S. anti-missile shield in Europe. And of course, they said this was needed for Iran. And Russia has been saying for quite a while, since we have the peace talks with Iran, there is no reason to keep this shield there. And we are starting to see that this has nothing to do with Iran. This was set up because of Russia, because the United States government central bankers, they know they'll be forcing Russia into a war, and they will need this U.S. anti-missile shield. Now, a senior-ranking Chinese general has looked at the situation and said, yeah, that's what it's there for. It is for Russia and most likely China, just like the THAAD system in South Korea is not just for North Korea, but also for China. And we can see that Russia and China, they're realizing what is going on here. They realize the U.S. government central bankers, they will be pushing for war, and they will not stop until they get it. We see that Russia, they signed the Turkish Stream pipeline deal, and Russia has allowed imports of Turkish oranges, tangerines, apricots, peaches, plums, and other fruit into Russia right now. And the decision was reached Monday during the signing of the Turkish Stream deal. They still have bans on grapes, apples, pears, strawberries, and other vegetables and poultry. But we can see right now that Russia is removing this a little bit at a time. and they want to see how relations go with Turkey. We see Russia is going to make an offer to Turkey for a Turkish air defense system. We understand that Turkey was going to purchase one from China, but then NATO stepped in and blocked that, or guilted them into not doing it. And we'll have to see what Turkey does at this point, because we can see right now that Turkey is hedging their bet right now, because they realize that the U.S. government central bankers, they're not doing well in Syria. They might not get that pipeline built that like they wanted to. Instead, they said, okay, we're not going to get that revenue. Maybe we need to make the deal with Russia. And it looks like they're looking economically at Russia, saying, okay, we will make the deal with the Turkish Stream. We will still work with the United States. And doesn't matter what works out here, because we can always cancel with Russia if the United States wins. If the United States doesn't win in Syria, we can just go with Russia and have the Turkish Stream pipeline. And it looks like they're playing both sides right now. We know that the United States government central bankers, they are pointing the finger at Russia, saying that they need to be brought up on war crimes in Syria. But we have to remember something very important, is that Syria, the elected government, it's a sovereign country under the UN. They invited Russia in there. Russia is bombing terrorists. They're not bombing schools, children, infrastructure. They're removing the country of terrorists. And this is why this war crimes charge is not going to go anywhere with Russia. It's going to be very, very difficult. But what's very interesting about all of this is that the U.S. may be guilty of war crimes, because they are supporting Saudi Arabia and the mass killings of civilians. The U.S. is supplying Saudi Arabia with weapons, and they might be brought up on war crime charges, because they are actually bombing hospitals, funerals, schools, destroying the infrastructure on purpose. And we can see right now that Saudi Arabia is the real aggressor in Yemen, and the U.S., whose actions have enabled Saudi Arabia war crimes, they might be considered a co-belligerent participant in what has happened in Yemen. And we can see right now that between the time of May 2015 to February 2016, the State Department approved sales of precision munitions to Saudi Arabia during this period. And this is when they actually dropped these bombs on civilians, destroyed infrastructure. And we see right now that the United States is being looked at for war crimes. Now, in that Yemen funeral bombing, there are photos and videos that have emerged, and what they're pointing out is that the fragments of these weapons, they are U.S.-made components, bombs. And we can see right now one of the pictures shows there's a fragment of an Mk-82 precision bomb produced by Raytheon. And this is one of the main U.S. defense contractors. And we can see this photo, which has not been verified, was taken at the site. And it shows that, yes, these are U.S.-made weapons. And we know what is happening in Yemen right now. The United States government wants their puppet government back in power. They're trying to hit the people and make them suffer, because they believe if they do this, the people will say, we've had enough, bring in the government, this will all end. But it hasn't happened. And we can see right now that Saudi Arabia and their paid mercenaries, they can't do the job. So yesterday we saw that false flag where the Houthis allegedly fired a missile nowhere near the U.S. destroyer. I think it was the USS Mason. And they said, wow, that was a close call. It almost hit us. And of course it fell into the ocean or wherever it was. Or maybe there wasn't even a missile. But whatever happened there, they're going to use it to go into Yemen. And we see already the Pentagon on Tuesday warned that whoever fired the missile at the U.S. Navy destroyer, that they've done so at their own peril. The Pentagon right now is planning and developing targets for a retaliatory strike in Yemen. This was done on purpose to get into Yemen. Just like the United States waited for this unity government that they put together to invite them in to bomb Libya. Remember, I said this many reports ago. The United States government central bankers, they need to get into every single one of these countries because they need to keep their puppet governments in power. They don't want an elected government. They want a puppet government which will obey the U.S. government because they're trying to keep the petrodollar propped up. The central bankers, they don't care how many people they kill, how many U.S. soldiers they send over there, as long as they can keep their system alive. What we're fighting for right now is the elites, paper, and ink. We're not fighting for democracy. We're not fighting for freedom. We're fighting for a central banking establishment run by the elites, the shadow government, and they are controlling everything right now. And they want their system alive long enough to start a major war because their system is completely falling apart. We see U.S. and the unity government in Libya. Well, they are ramping up the bombings inside of Libya, trying to get those people that are trying to throw out the unity government. We see Turkey right now is telling the Iraqi leader, listen, we're going to be fighting in the Battle of Mosul, and you have no say whatsoever. So Erdogan is saying, listen, we're bringing our troops into your country, and we're going to fight here, and you have no choice. This is how bad it has gotten, where the U.S., Turkey, the coalition forces are telling countries, we don't care what you think. We're bringing our troops in. We're going to be creating war in your country, and you have no say. Can you imagine if that was happening here in this country, where all of a sudden Syria or North Korea or Russia, any of these countries decided, hey, you know something? We're going to come to your country. We're going to set up some bases. We're going to bring in some troops, and we don't care what you say, because we're just going to do it. We see the UK Special Forces. They're preparing for maybe chemical warfare in Iraq because the SAS troops, they have reportedly been kitted with chemical warfare equipment. They also have biological clothing, and they're getting prepared for this battle in Mosul where they believe there might be some type of chemical warfare. We see Turkey is going to expand their operation east of the Euphrates right now because what are they doing? They need more of the land. They need to create these safe zones. So they are clearing out the entire northern part of Syria right now. And we're starting to realize why the United States government central bankers are using the propaganda and pushing the propaganda so hard in Syria, where they're saying that Russia is barbaric, Syria is barbaric, they're committing war crimes, because one, we know the United States government central bankers, they're on the losing end of this battle in Aleppo. Two, since February, all the way up to September 1st, 35,000 terrorists were killed in Syria. 586 settlements and 12,360 square kilometers of the country's territory, it was liberated during this period. So we can see why the United States government central bankers are getting very upset, pointing fingers, because they're on the losing end of this. And we see right now they're going to do whatever they have to start this war. And Russia realizes this. Russia is going to supply the Pantsir air defense system to the Syrian army. Now, this contract was signed back in 2008, and they're delivering more of these missile systems, maybe 36 to 50 of them with about 700 missiles. And we can see right now that Russia is bringing in more military assets. We know the aircraft carrier is in the Mediterranean. 3 destroyers are in the Mediterranean. We can see they're building a permanent naval base in Tartus now. They're going to be a permanent air base because they realize, the United States government central bankers, they're getting ready for war. That's what this is all about. We see Al-Sham and Al-Qaeda, they decided to form an alliance with Al-Qaeda. So they were split up. They were rebranded so they wouldn't be on the UN terrorist list. And now it doesn't matter, and they're coming back together. That's what's happening right now. Because it really doesn't matter at this point, because there's no ceasefire or peace deal. The only reason the United States created this new offshoot of al-Nusra was so that it wasn't on the list of terrorists in the UN. So this way Russia couldn't say, hey, that's a terrorist group. But we can see at this point it doesn't matter, so all the terrorists are just going into one group. Because why does it even matter at this point? The United States government central bankers, they realize this. We know that the White House is saying that Russia hacked into the election system. And of course, to figure this out, it would take years. Think about what a state actor does when they're going to hack. They use compromised servers. They bounce it off from one server to another. It is very hard to track down, especially in this short period of time that they said they did it. Just like they said that North Korea hacked Sony. Completely fake, phony, and false. Because even if you get to the first compromised server, depending on where it is, that's not the only one. You have to track down each and every one until you get to the end. And of course, just because the FBI produces IP addresses, anybody can do that. But what they can't do is show the evidence linking server to server to server to server back to the original source. That's the real proof, not throwing up an IP address and saying, we got you. Here's an IP address in Russia. That's all they did. Anybody can do that. Go on the net. You can ping anything and find addresses. It's very easy. Now, we understand that Russia has been preparing, and they had a nuclear drill in their country. And we can see right now that Russia, they're telling their government officials to immediately bring back children who are studying abroad. And what this tells me is that they realize that the U.S. government central bankers, they are almost ready to initiate war. And we can see that Russia is calling back their people. They understand eventually what is going to happen, that we will be entering a period of war. We can see the U.S. government central bankers, they are backed into a corner. Syria at this point is lost. If Syria is lost, that means the petrodollar is doomed, which means we're headed towards an economic collapse, which means they need to start a war to explain away why the entire system is completely falling apart. And it looks like we are heading to that period. We're getting all of these indicators that are showing us that war is about to start. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.